Hi, everybody. It's Amalia, founder of S.T.E.M Braids and Beyond and host of the Silver Bullet S.T.E.M podcast. Today, I have an incredible guest to introduce to the audience. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jolene Hermanson. I am a hydrogeologist based out of Vancouver Island in Canada. I'm also a nutrition and health and wellness coach. I primarily work with women who are in STEM fields, in engineering, geoscience fields. Yeah, and I'm really happy to be here.
How can anybody get in touch with you?
Well, they can find me on LinkedIn, Jolene Hermanson. I also have a website, jolenehermanson.com, that they can go to for more information as well.
All right, beautiful. Tell us again what you do and what that means in STEM.
So I am a hydrogeologist, so hydro being water and geologist, the ground, the geology. So essentially it's just the study of the movement of water through the ground. We deal with sourcing water, getting water for communities, for industrial purposes, mining, oil and gas. We look at protecting the water, protecting the environment. We look at long-term sustainability, so how the effects of pumping or use of water will affect the aquifer health over the long term, and the availability of water for multiple stakeholders. So to me, what it means is it's the study of management of groundwater, which I think to a lot of people, because they don't see it, they don't necessarily either know it's there or take it for granted. So some people might not even realize that they are drinking groundwater when they're drinking it. And so it can almost have sort of a mystical, like what is like a magical, we don't really know it's there. So, it's almost like how people view the atmosphere in some ways, like, well, what is it? What is the wind? Is it magic? And it's not. There's a science to it, and we can study that science through data. So to me, it's kind of a mix of managing a resource that a lot of people don't know that is critical to our society, as well as understanding data and using that to sort of visualize it for people and help them understand that science.
Absolutely. So, what led you to an interest in that field in STEM?
I think the initial start was being interested in earth science in general. And it wasn't, I know a lot of people get into earth science because they're interested in the gems and the precious metals. For me, it was always more about the process of it. I remember one memory in particular. It was in grade 7, and my principal was substituting, and there was this big map of the world. And he just showed us how, hey, do you notice that the continents fit into each other like this perfect puzzle piece? And that was my first introduction to plate tectonics. And I was just like, what? I do see that. How is that possible? And then he told us about plate tectonics and about the core and the convective currents and how that shifts the plates. And I was completely dumbfounded that was a thing no one had ever told me before. And so I think that was really my first insight into, like, wow, there's this whole thing going on our planet that we don't see on a day-to-day basis, but it's going on right in front of our eyes. And I know, so I had the experience of a father who was very outdoorsy. He took me snowmobiling into the mountains when I was in grade 4. He took us up to the Yukon territories in northern Canada for a month when I was in grade 6. And we went to a place called Barkerville in the mountains. If anyone's familiar with the gold rush days of like the 1800s, Barkerville that's a lot where my family was from, and they were surveyors and prospectors. So I've always been around the natural world in some aspect, living in a rural area. And I just always was drawn to it, always wanted to understand it.
So, I understand the exposure to the platonics plates, but how did you know what field in STEM that was?
Right. So that interest I had in earth sciences in general, I never knew, I didn't know anybody who was in earth sciences. So I didn't know what jobs were available to me. And in hindsight, I probably would suggest people work backwards, but I sort of followed sort of my interest into earth science in general. And as I got into it, the main jobs that were available in where I'm from were more in mining and hard rock. They call it hard rock geology. So you're looking more at rocks and figuring out the mining processes that went on. And I liked it, but it was very time intensive in terms of like having to go out into the field for long periods of time. And I did do that for a few jobs, but I didn't necessarily want to continue that. And then I started to find jobs coming up in hydrogeology and groundwater consulting. And I thought maybe that would be of interest. And so I tried my first job, and I really fell in love with the science of hydrogeology through that. So I didn't actually get a degree or specialize in hydrogeology until after I had that a couple of years of consulting experience. And I was like, no, this for me is very interesting, because it was all about the process rather than trying to find minerals. So that appealed to me a lot more. So I think for me, it was a little bit of school following my interests, but then also getting out into the real world and really understanding, oh, okay, if I want to do this job, this is what this is going to mean for my lifestyle. And that doesn't align, but this does align, and I find it interesting.
So knowing what you know now, in hindsight, even before you got exposure to looking at a world map, do you see interests in your life before that could have led you to being able to identify this may have been the field in STEM you would have been interested in all along?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I definitely can see, like that example that I gave when I went to the Yukon. When I came home, I remember we were laying out grass sod on our yard. So it's like chunks of grass. Like I think my parents were trying to regrow the grass. And this is a little bit nerdy and embarrassing, I guess, but I remember like I was laying the sod out, and I would like almost soften my eyes because it made me feel like I was back in the Yukon. And I was really fascinated with that scale, like how I could look at a scale, like a small scale of something, and zoom out and make it feel really big. And there was this interest there in the process of earth sciences, and that playing with the scale that I remember finding really interesting when I was a kid. I also used to love computer games, and I would like sit and play, not like really intricate computer games where I was problem solving, and I would sit with it for hours and just work at it until I solved the problem. And I think my ability to do that now has transferred into earth sciences, where I will sit with a math problem, or I'll sit with like some sort of like study that we're trying to figure out. And that tenacity, I believe, like really started when I was a kid on computer games. So there's definitely a lot of things like that. A teacher once told me as well that she thought I was going to be a writer, and my mom always thought I was going to be an author. And so that never came to fruition, but that I think my ability and my love for writing works well in this field where I'm writing reports. They're a little bit more technical, but often, writing or doing presentations for the general public has really helped me to bridge that as well.
What is the biggest misconception about your job? Like when you tell anybody that you're hydrogeologist, what do they think? What is the number one question you're asked? Like what? Like
I think that
for me, when I say STEM educator, they're like, "Oh, you work with stem cells?" It's the cutest thing ever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, honestly, I get a lot of blank looks and like, what? You do what? What is that? So I almost don't tell people I'm a hydrogeologist. I tell them I'm a groundwater consultant or a groundwater scientist, because that seems to their brain, like for whatever reason, hydrogeologist, it's like people just don't know like what that is. So I would say the biggest misconception with it depends who I'm talking to, honestly, like the audience or my friends. But I'd say the biggest misconception is that you have to be a genius to do it, because it just sounds very, very technical. And it is technical, but it's not, it's attainable, I would say, for most people who are into math and science. It's not an extraordinary specialty by any stretch.
Yeah, so it's like playing according to your strength. I believe everybody has STEM aptitude. It's finding one in STEM would have you sitting there for hours and not.
Oh, yeah.
move. And there's just not enough discussions about all of the fields. Everybody talks about technology and engineering, but there's sciences and math aspects. Like me, I discovered STEM late because I didn't realize that math is an area that alone that you can spend.
Right.
You have to have all the STEM aspects, just figure out what that is and sit with it.
100%. And I found that too. Like that was part of my problem when I was in my undergrad. I remember feeling like, what am I, like, I got into this because I liked it, but what am I going to do with it? And all I really thought was like, I could pick mining or I could pick oil and gas. Like that's all I knew. And there's just so much more to it.
Absolutely. And that, remember, before we started the podcast, I was saying the problem has been misidentified. The way it's sold is that you have to be the entire scale. You have to be the entire spectrum. No, you could just be green and still and everybody else will cover every other spectrum.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And feeling, I think sometimes, I mean, maybe we're going to get into it, but I think sometimes that's what can lead to feeling like an imposter because you think, well, I like this aspect of it, but I really don't want to do that part, or I'm not good at that part. And so you feel like you can't do the whole because of it. Yeah.
Are there a lot of women in your field?
I think there's getting to be more. Our company, we have sort of an environmental group that focuses more on contaminated sites or soils that have been compromised. And then we have the physical hydrogeology, which is the group I'm in. And I would say there's less women in the physical hydrogeology group. There's a couple more junior women that have just entered with us. And I do have colleagues in hydrogeology, but I would say it's definitely very male dominated.
Here's a silly question. I knew about earth science as a study, but do a lot of universities offer that degree?
Yeah, well, I think the major ones in Canada do for sure. I did my undergrad at the University of Victoria, and there was a small but growing, very, very good, actually very strong earth science department there. And a lot of my colleagues who have graduated from there, I think the majority of us are actually in earth science working. Like we did get jobs working. And I've had, if my boss was here, he would tell you that he's hired quite a few people from that university. And he has said that the majority of us all are very outside the box thinkers. And I think part of that is because it was a university that had a lot of different aspects in that program. So you're thinking on different scales, not just like tunneled into one particular avenue. So you'd be surprised. It's actually, it's a growing, well, it's not growing right now, but there's a growing need for earth sciences right now. When we look at electric cars, those all need mineral resources to help with the batteries, climate change, oil, energy, like these are all environment. These are all areas where we do need large earth science programs to help with human resources in those fields.
So environmental science falls under earth science?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Environment, energy, natural resource management, mining, mineral resources. That would all be under earth sciences. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
I knew of environmental engineering, but I didn't realize that it fell under the site because, in STEM, engineering falls under.
Yeah, environmental engineering would fall under engineering. So we do there is an overlap there, and I don't know how it's regulated in states, but in Canada, in BC, the engineers and geoscientists are regulated under one body. I think because of that sort of overlap that's there. So you can work in earth sciences under the engineering field or under the geology field. And at our company, so I work for a company called Waterline Resources. We have both engineers and geoscientists.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever dealt with imposter syndrome in your job or in the field?
Yeah, totally. I think that might have been one of the reasons why I sort of switched my niche with coaching from just strictly like health nutrition to, hey, wait a minute, I can use these same tools to help women with imposter syndrome in this field. And not just women, I think it happens for men as well. But a lot of the clients that I've had have had imposter syndrome, and I can relate because of it happened with me as well. And I think still does, but I can catch it sooner. I can notice the symptoms of it and go, wait a minute, like this is what's happening for me. So for me, it was huge I first experienced it when I went from high school to university in sciences. I kind of was a bit of a goof in high school, and I didn't get serious until probably grade 12 and then university. And when I entered university, I had so many people's voices in my head telling me how hard it was, how sciences was hard, oh, you think high school's hard? Like high school's nothing compared to university. So I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Why am I here? Like I shouldn't be here. And I worked so hard, and I ended up getting like, crazy good grades because of how hard I worked. But it was a lot of that perfectionism was stemmed from my imposter syndrome. So that's one thing that I talk about now with my clients is, hey, like when you're noticing yourself having to get things perfect, like to the point where it's like stifling you and you have an insane imbalance in your work and life, notice where that might be coming from. Is that coming from you don't think you're good enough? Yeah.
That's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I've asked that question so many times, and I don't think I've ever gotten an answer like that before. So that's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does STEM mean to you?
STEM to me means, I think now, as I've kind of aged a little bit, I would have given you a different answer when I was younger. To me, it's about helping and solving problems for our world. And also solving problems and like ingenuity, like coming up with new technology, new things. But to me, those are still part of the same thing. It's the solutions, coming up with solutions. And so that solution forward thinking, I just find it really exciting. And I think, we can be doom and gloom on all the things going on, but if we can put our focus towards STEM and finding new solutions for problems, I mean, that's the crux of why humans are here and why we are where we are.
Absolutely. And I mean, so many things I love about what you said. But when you say that STEM is about ideas and solutions, if we broke down STEM as that's what it is, so many people would see it as so much more accessible. When you make it sound like it's this big technical monster from somewhere, nobody wants to be eaten. But if you said, if you can problem solve, you can STEM, a 3-year-old would be out here like, I have good ideas.
Right. I love that. Yeah. Nobody wants to be eaten.
Monster, a technology monster, so.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Like our kids are doing it. Like they don't have that bias that like holding them back or giving them that imposter syndrome. They're just like coming up with solutions and possibilities. And yeah.
Be like, enough ideas for today.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to share in closing? We're going to have a workbook that we're going to attach in the description below. What else do you want to talk to the audience about?
Yeah. So that the workbook there is a lot to do with like helping people through, I think, some of the things that we just mentioned, the imposter syndrome, work-life balance. I found one thing that I didn't really understand going into STEM was the importance of, and I don't even want to call them soft skills because I find that term like misleading, but just understanding like, while we're solving technical problems, we are still humans and we have human thoughts and we have human fears and human emotions. And so if we can learn also like have a good understanding and awareness of that for ourselves, and then also in the colleagues that we're working with, I think we can all move forward a lot easier without that sort of, or just even having awareness of when imposter syndrome kicks up or when like our ego has gotten in the way. Because my goodness, there's so much ego among people in STEM that sometimes I think it contradicts what we're trying to do, which is collaborate and build on together versus like trying to hide what we're doing, or not telling someone if we don't know because we're afraid of what the consequences of that are. So I think there's a big gap there, and part of my coaching is trying to fill that and understand it. So that's what the workbook is for, is to help people to do that.
Absolutely beautiful. Is there anything else you wanted to say in closing?
No, I think that's everything. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Anytime, feel free to come back and chat with us again. All right. Thank you so much. Bye.